One of the first questions I asked my GP on the day I was diagnosed, and also the doctors following that day, was about my fertility. I'd always wanted children. They were a really big part of my future, and I knew this would affect my fertility. Thankfully, when they were going to just do the hysterectomy, they were going to actually leave my ovaries where they were, which meant that whilst I couldn't carry babies in the future, I could go through an IVF cycle and get eggs. Sadly, when they told me I was going to have chemotherapy and radiotherapy, that was going to damage my ovaries. So the day I woke up from surgery, from my hysterectomy, or failed hysterectomy, that was the day I started IVF. They allowed me just a few weeks to have one attempt at IVF, which I was very, very lucky that they gave me that opportunity, and that my cancer was of a certain type that allowed me to have the hormones. So that took 18 days of stimulation, and luckily I got 7 eggs. So they're now frozen. They've been frozen for 3 years over in the city, and I'll hopefully defrost them, so to speak, and have a baby in the future. But it was horrendous having to face that, and I'll never know what it's like to carry a baby, because my uterus it's got radiation damage. And that is one of the saddest things about having gynae cancer is the fertility problems that you're faced with. You know, you get over the cancer, and then all of a sudden your friends are having babies and living the dream, and sadly, you know, it's been more complicated for me. I face low times every time my friends get pregnant and tell me, and they're very sensitive to the fact, but it really saddens me, and I find myself being jealous for the first time ever in my life, really. I want what they have and I can't have it. So it's very, very sad for me every time I have to face that.
Fertility is a significant issue for women with gynecological cancer, and this is really important that we address it right at the beginning before treatment has ever started. Often people are quite nihilistic and make assumptions that you can't do anything because it's gynecological cancer. That is not the case. So before women start treatment, they should be referred to a reproductive endocrinologist, or just the other name for a fertility specialist, so that they can discuss what the options are that are available for them. By the time they've started treatment, it's too late, and this is something that then we cannot change after the event for the majority of gynecological cancers. For a woman with cervical cancer, we can do fertility preserving surgery, something that's called a radical trachelectomy, if she has an early stage cervical cancer. If the woman has a hysterectomy, the ovaries would be left behind so that she could at a later stage go through an IVF cycle and remove some eggs. If she's going to have radiotherapy, that is going to make her infertile because she's going to go into premature menopause. So in that case, she would need to go through an IVF cycle before she started treatment so that either some eggs or some embryos could be stored. In women who have had either a hysterectomy or have radiotherapy, they are either not going to have a uterus or have a uterus that has been affected by radiation. So these women are going to need to have a surrogate at some point in the future, which adds a whole complexity to those issues for them. Reproductive techniques are improving all the time quite significantly and very rapidly. So it's important that women don't decide not to do a treatment because it is described as experimental at this point, because in 10 years' time we may well be able to source eggs from ovarian tissue and grow that up to be, have it fertilised to be an embryo. After treatment for cancer, many women have fears and concerns about having children. These may be that they feel that being pregnant may make their cancer recur, and although there is no evidence for that, it can be a concern for many women. They may also have concerns that their cancer or the treatment that they've had may actually cause problems in the child that they have. Again, research has shown in large populations with breast cancer following these children through that there were no additional issues for children conceived after a woman had had breast cancer. For some women, their treatment may have impacted on their body, so certain chemotherapy drugs can affect the heart or the lungs. Now then putting them through a pregnancy may mean that the actual additional stress of pregnancy on the body causes these physical problems to become even more of an issue. So for many women, well, for all women with cancer, we should actually treat them as a high-risk pregnancy so that when they do become pregnant, they are referred to an obstetrician who has an interest and ability to manage a high-risk pregnancy, so that they get both the medical support but also the psychological support they need through that pregnancy.
One of the common problems for younger women with a gynecological cancer is the whole issue of fertility. Now, that's immediately obvious for someone who hasn't yet had children, although one needs to be careful to not to assume that someone necessarily wants to have children. But it is something to discuss with women who haven't had children, whether they're planning to at some future point. It's also a mistake to gloss over the fact that someone with children will not have wanted more children. And I can remember a woman, it was a very good lesson to me very early on in my career in gynecological cancer, when a woman with 6 children was devastated about her need for a hysterectomy for cervical cancer. She had an early stage disease. In all likelihood she was going to be cured. In fact, she has been cured of her cancer. But she was devastated about the loss of her uterus. And that was about the fact that she felt that she was defined by her motherhood, that the thing she had done best in her life was to raise children, and her cancer had in fact been diagnosed just as she was thinking about embarking on a 7th pregnancy. And so for her, the loss of her fertility was as significant as it would have been for another woman of 35 who hadn't had any children at all.
Hopefully we'll be able to have children in the future in whatever capacity, whether it's through defrosting my eggs and finding a surrogate, or adoption, or other options. But kids are definitely on the radar for the future, which is great. That would be a real dream come true.